All right, well, good morning. Excited to see so many people participating in this session. This is something that I am really excited about personally, so I'm excited that you guys are here to join us this morning. I'm Jennifer Dixon, and I work with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy's Environmental Support Division, and my main primary role is an air quality liaison where I help support the air quality division with things. So I get to work with a lot of the supplemental environmental projects, and it's always really exciting work because it's something that gives back to the community that enforcement action takes place in. So you're going to hear a lot more about that this morning. We've got a great panel to talk to you about investing and engaging with communities. So I'm excited to talk about that. And just to get you started, of course, if this is your first time with us, I want to just remind you that your microphones are going to be muted. We're recording this session, so for some reason you need to leave early, you can feel free to do that and go back and watch it later. Or if you missed any of the other sessions, they're all available either through the Whova app or on the website now or on our YouTube channel. So those are closed captioned and ready for viewing. So enjoy those if you want. Enjoy them a second time if you want to as well. If you have questions, you can use that question and answer button on the bottom of your screen. Go ahead and type those questions in for us. I know the panel has left some time for that, and we might get some typed back answers as well. In the Whova app, you can also put your questions in, and we will see those and we'll get to those. While we're talking about Whova, just something really quick I wanted to mention is in the first couple of days of the conference, it was a little challenging to let us know what you thought about the sessions, but we've made that easier. So even if you just rate the session with your thumbs up, if you liked it or not liked it, whatever the case may be, we would really appreciate that because we want to know that these sessions are of value and what kind of value they have been to you and what we can do better, of course, always. So with that being said, Janine, I am going to pass it over to you. So if you want to go ahead and share your screen over mine, and then you can take it away with introducing our great panel of folks this morning.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. Good morning, everybody. I just want to make sure everybody can see the screen there. And my name is Janine Camilleri. I am the Air Quality Enforcement Supervisor, and we're really looking forward to spending this morning talking about supplemental environmental projects. We have a great team of folks in this panel to talk with everybody today. And oh shucks, I am having technical difficulties. Can folks hear me?
Yep, we can hear you just fine, Janine.
Okay,
you're
great.
good.
All right, there you go. Sorry about that. Nope. I just wanted to introduce our panelists, and Aaron Moran is on my team for the Air Quality Enforcement Unit. We work really closely with George Acevedo as well. He's our Air Quality Inspector out of the Detroit District Office. We also have John Grosshams here today from EPA Region 5, and Justin Onwenu, who works for Sierra Club out of Detroit. And we've all worked very closely together over the last year to year and a half. And I consider this my SEP team. And one of the goals with today's discussion is to really get as much information out there about supplemental environmental projects and to answer questions that communities may have and look for ways that we can work together to engage and develop, great supplemental environmental projects. We wanted to give a little bit of a background in case folks aren't familiar with these projects because they are associated with enforcement actions. So we're going to give a little bit of a background about what are SEPs. They're a voluntary project that's part of an enforcement action. So before we can even start talking about supplemental environmental projects, it's got to be tied to an enforcement action. And we've had quite a few projects over the years. Most recently, we've had 3 projects in the Detroit community that, we've gone out and folks have heard about through maybe the media or public hearings. But one important piece is that, they are tied to resolving an enforcement action with a company. They also must benefit the environment or the public health. So, we look really closely at that. We want to make sure that there's pollution reduction, pollution prevention, public health SEPs. And they must go beyond what's required by law. So you can't really get credit for something a company was already required to do, or a community. And another key component to this is that a portion of a penalty, so every enforcement action in air quality has a penalty. The company does need to pay a portion of that penalty to the general fund. They can have their penalty mitigated if they do a supplemental environmental project, and a portion of that penalty is then invested back into the community through a supplemental environmental project. Why are SEPs beneficial? This is something we've been focusing on for the last couple of years in air quality. They're really important because taking those enforcement dollars and putting them back into the community that was affected by the violations, there can be direct environmental and public health benefits from these projects. They're things that the community and local governments are already kind of planning for and working for. So there's a lot of projects, and I know there's a lot of need out there. So let's take these dollars and put it back into the community that was affected. Also, it provides for an opportunity to engage with the community. There was a lot of work that was done over the last year to get community input and discuss these projects with community members who are living near areas that are in violation and going through enforcement. So we really want to invest back into the community and partner with community leaders. Just to give you a little bit of a background, supplemental environmental projects have been around for quite some time. They've been part of Michigan's enforcement program since the 90s. 2015 kind of was a really critical point for us. EPA issued, under the Obama administration, they issued an updated federal supplemental environmental project policy. And there was a lot of emphasis on environmental justice communities. And that really got us thinking about how can we in Michigan take some of these changes and implement them in our state. So we started looking at, what could we do to better incentivize SEPs in environmental justice communities. Around that same time, we received a very substantial and important report from Great Lakes Environmental Law Center, basically explaining ways that we could do a better job. We worked on revising our supplemental environmental policy, which was issued this year. And we do also now have more emphasis on the importance of community input in environmental justice areas. And we also align to better promote the use of supplemental environmental projects by providing companies with higher penalty mitigation credit if they, do a SEP in an environmental justice community, if that SEP gets a lot of community input. Also, we also want to emphasize that pollution prevention SEPs are really critical as well. So in those categories, a company may receive 100% of the penalty mitigation. So $1 going back into the community. So just to lead on those discussions, we wanted to also have John talk about, some of the, theories behind how do you develop a good SEP. And I spoke with John a lot in the past because I really wanted to learn from EPA. They were doing quite a few SEPs in Michigan and we wanted to learn from them. So I'm going to hand it over to John to talk a little bit about, what he's learned over the years.
Thanks, Janine. And I'm glad we can talk about this topic at the Environmental Justice Conference this year because it's timely for a couple different reasons. So it fits into the whole context of environmental justice and what's happening right now. We know there's always enforcement taking place. There's always inspections taking place. There's always a possibility that a supplemental environmental project could come out of that. And so it's always helpful to talk about this, especially in Southeast Michigan context. And also, as Janine just covered, Michigan has been upping their game with SEPs recently. And so it's very nice that we can talk about this at a point where the infrastructure is in place, the policies are in place, the team is in place in Michigan. And this is coming at the same time that the federal government hasn't been as active on SEPs the last few years, but Michigan has held strong in this respect. And so I think that it's timely for that reason. And if for no other reason, then it's the fact that EPA is also slowly turning its policies forward regarding supplemental environmental projects. There was a few years where there were memos and issuances of different types of guidance that was out there, and now that is changing so that there is more supplemental environmental project guidance policy memo work that is happening that's saying, yes, go do this in environmental justice communities. You heard earlier from the administrator at the kickoff of the conference about the importance of working in environmental justice communities, and I expect we'll see more of that change over time. So this slide simply shows that to get a successful project, you really have to be meeting that opportunity and preparation component. And we all know that works with every project, but especially for SEPs. And that's why we're excited to talk about this topic today. Janine, next slide. So I did want to just highlight a couple of the challenges with supplemental environmental projects. And this chart just shows quickly how they evolve from a inspection, which turns into a violation, which really starts that whole idea gathering phase with the community. And the key terms are really connection and impact. What is the connection from the violation to the project? If it's a water violation, is the project rain barrels? If the project is, or if the violation is something related to air quality, is the project going to be air filters in schools, or is it going to have some sort of air or energy components? And this is really the key part we're going to come back to again and again in the session. It doesn't stop there. There's also working on the actual refinement of the idea, and then ultimately getting everyone to agree on it, which is not an easy feat. Next slide. So when I talk about the connection, I wanted to give a couple of examples of what that might look like. So if we're talking about a violation where the Clean Air Act was violated and it had to do with, say, dust emissions, or if it had to do with a certain type of particulate matter or a certain material, you can expect that the projects proposed that will be successful will be those that have to deal with that specific violation topic. So it's hard to do a rain barrel project to deal with an air quality violation, because as Janine pointed out, we want to get back to the impacted community and make sure that the impacted community sees that benefit. So just as an example from US Steel that was done in the past, there was a series of violations in multiple cities across the Midwest, and each of those cities had its own specific set of projects that fit into the context of that community. And so, for instance, in Granite City, Illinois, the result was street sweepers sweeping up dust that comes from the plant and other places, has a clear connection to issues of dust and air quality. Similarly, the issue of working in a community like in Detroit or Gary, looking at schools and what are the impacts for schools, and how can we think of projects that might have a school connection. Air filters are very popular school projects. This US Steel example focused on air, but if it was a particular material, say if it was mercury, lead, we might see a project that focused on mercury or lead. And if you're in schools, it might be something like promoting a school science chemistry lab cleanup fund for the school district so they can get rid of their old mercury or other types of materials that might be in that science lab. Those are also types of projects that might be associated with a particular type of violation. So it's just something that's helpful to keep in mind when we're thinking about SEPs in that context. Next slide. All right, so let's play the video here. We can talk about one of these SEPs in action.
So we're excited to be able to launch a collaborative partnership with the EPA to be replacing the light ballasts within the schools here at the Carrie Gosh Early Learning Center.
Well, we're here to change out some light fixtures. We've identified light fixtures in this school that, based on the age and type of light fixture, we suspect that they contain PCBs. So we're changing those out and adding more energy efficient light fixtures that don't contain PCBs. This
wasn't being done because there's a problem. We're doing it just to be proactive.
Well, this was a community that was on our radar anyway, because we're very concerned about environmental justice communities. Those are communities where poor people and people of color may have been disproportionately impacted by environmental hazards. Well, we had a real opportunity here in settling an EPA enforcement action that we were able to provide the school with the funds to do this through our Supplemental Environmental Project policy. That's where we take an enforcement action, and in lieu of having the company pay a civil penalty to the U.S. Treasury, they can actually do a project like this.
In settlement of that case, Heritage agreed in part to give funding to East Chicago schools in order to conduct fluorescent light bulb retrofits.
Yeah, the new light fixtures that we're putting in will use these new electronic ballasts that use 41% less energy. That's going to translate to actually saving money on the utility bills for the school district. And that's money they can put back into education as opposed to using it to pay for utility costs. At the same time, we're improving the lighting so it provides a better learning environment for the children.
And that was Kendall from the EPA office talking about projects in East Chicago, but that same project has been done in Detroit with the Detroit schools as part of that particular SEP. And that's a very popular type of resolution for SEP projects in air quality cases. So let me hand it off to Erin, and Erin can talk a little more about some of the EGLE SEP examples.
Thanks, John. So yeah, I have, I think, two SEP examples, and I guess I want to clarify. A lot of the times, we in government use acronyms, and SEP is one of them. So just for clarity and plain language purposes, when we say SEP, we mean Supplemental Environmental Project, because I think if we said Supplemental Environmental Project the whole time during this presentation, it would add a lot of time onto it. So the first project that I'm going to talk about was a settlement that we finalized at the end of 2020 with Marathon Petroleum in Detroit. This was through an enforcement action, a consent order. And in this project, Marathon worked with the community to put a air cooling and filtration system in the Mark Twain School for Scholars, which is in the Detroit area, and it is really close to Marathon's refinery in Detroit. So in this project, they're going to be putting new air conditioning and an air purification system in the school, along with some enhanced air filters. So right now, that project is sort of in motion. Marathon ordered all of their equipment at the end of last year, and it was delivered just last month. So as soon as school is out this year, they're going to be starting construction at the school, and the project should be up and running by the start of the school year in the fall. So for this project, legally, Marathon was required to spend $226,000, and that was under the requirements of the consent order. But as they worked through this project and did more engineering studies, the cost is likely going to be more around $500,000. Another SEP that Marathon did as part of this consent order, but I don't have a slide for, is that they developed a website that shows real-time air quality data for a few different pollutants that are connected to and measured by different monitors along the perimeter of their fence line of Marathon's property. So unfortunately, I forgot to send the moderators the link to that website, but I'm sure we can get it to you. Did I just advance the slide?
No, I did, Erin.
Okay. I'm sorry, I rolled my mouse and it happened, so sorry. The next project I'd like to talk about is a settlement that we had last year with US Steel. In this settlement, US Steel agreed to tear down this abandoned building in River Rouge. It was the Veterans Memorial Ice Rink / Dan Riney Hall. As you can see in the picture here, there are a lot of holes in the roof. The building's abandoned. It's a hazard for anyone who might decide they want to go explore in it or around it. They did do some asbestos surveys and abatements there, and some other surveys looking for refrigerants, PCBs, and mercury. Currently, they've fenced off the area in preparation to start the actual demolition in the building. And so the actual demolition should be happening in the next few weeks to months. So after this building is demolished, it's right next to a different baseball field. So they're going to level the ground and fill in any holes and then plant it with grass seeds so that the community or city of River Rouge can further develop that piece of land.
Thank you, Erin. I really appreciate you going over those two examples. And we are available any day of the week, I guess not on weekends, but to ask questions of us about these projects. We're really excited to be here today to just talk and provide as much information as we can on supplemental environmental projects and get communities thinking about what are the possibilities. We've been working at EGLE to, increase the amount of information that we can provide to. So we've created a new SEP webpage that is on our EGLE Air Quality Division enforcement page. On that, you'll find SEP examples, which I think is really helpful. Sometimes I'll get a call from an interested community member and I'll point them to the direction of the summaries as a tool to, give them some ideas about what possible SEPs may work in their community. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for doing projects that, have never been thought of before. So innovation and looking to other projects that we can explore with communities as well. And also, I just wanted to mention that other helpful links, and I believe we're going to be sharing this information in the chat, is EPA's SEP webpage. I want to take us now into a panel discussion because I think it's really important to hear from everybody on our panel. We've all worked pretty closely together, and we want to share, the importance of communication and partnering together is really what makes these projects critical and successful. So I'm going to ask a few questions of our panel, and then at the end, we'll also do some Q&A. So this question is for Justin and Aaron. From your perspective, what does a successful SEP look like? Why don't you go ahead, Justin?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing is that we recognize that SEPs are one part of a much larger puzzle. So I think for a long time, community residents have complained that that community residents are bearing the brunt of the burden when it comes to pollution, but not any of the fine money or any of the solutions. And so I think SEPs address that very specific problem as we also work to reduce pollution at the source and make sure our communities are safe. But I think a good SEP is first and foremost community centered. And what I mean by that is that I think a lot of times companies wonder, what are the things that we need to be doing better in the community? And I think the best way to know that is by asking folks who live near the facility, making sure that the ideas that are being put forward are not just a check writing exercise, but are a way to build trust with the community, a way to address the specific needs and wants of the community. And I think in the Marathon case in particular that you mentioned, there were a number of community residents like Teresa Landrum, Kim Somerville, Dr. Dolores Leonard, and Vincent Martin, a lot of other folks who contributed to making sure that we understood first and foremost what the desires of the community were. And that's how the air filtration in the Mark Twain School for Scholars came up, but also in making sure that community residents were the ones that were sitting directly across from the table from Marathon, communicating directly with you all at EGLE. I think that the project is important, making sure that it's a good project that addresses public health needs, but also the process and making sure that it's community centered, I think is really important as well.
Great, thank you.
And I definitely, everything that Justin said, I'm probably going to echo. But I think first and foremost, it has to be a project that benefits the public health or the environment. That's really the basis of any SEP that we do in an enforcement action. And like I said, to echo what Justin said, it's a project that the community wants. We don't want to see just any random project stuck in the community. We like to see the company in the enforcement action and also ourselves at EGLE really communicating with the community to know, what do they want? What do they want to see? What do they think is, fair for them based on the violations that we're resolving in a consent order. And so a project that may provide some reparations to the community that may have been harmed by the violations or the air quality violations. Also, I think it's really important to have a well thought out, well executed project and a project that will provide benefits very far into the future, not anything that's short term. So we on our end, and I know the community and the company, and there's a well executed project, there's a lot of work that goes into it. And that's something that we want to continue into the future. So, there's a few different building blocks to make that happen. And I think this is what we're going to discuss in upcoming dialogue.
Well, thank you. I think it's really important to, focus on that collaboration, and that takes time. So, I'd like to also ask you guys, how do we keep and why is open communication between, the government, meaning EGLE, the business or the individual who's part of the enforcement action, and the community as a SEP is being developed, based on your experiences, if you could, talk a little bit about why that's critical. Aaron, do you want to go ahead?
Sure, I can go and then Justin can follow up. So there's a lot of different components, I think, that we've known and also we're learning throughout the SEP process that are reasons why communication is really the basis of SEPs and how to develop a good one. So a successful project is produced by open and meaningful dialogue. So this means that both EGLE and the company, like we said, need to get community input. So, you know, this can include in-person meetings when there's not a global pandemic. Also, I think one benefit that we've seen from the pandemic is that obviously we've been using a lot of virtual meetings. So, you know, before when we maybe had in-person meetings, it takes a lot of preparation for us to go somewhere and schedule a place and find a place to meet with the community. But with a virtual meeting or even just a conference call, you know, we can talk to someone one day, they can organize, and the day after that, put a virtual meeting together to meet with the community. And also, I think all this dialogue needs to happen both inside and outside of an enforcement action. So, you know, inside of an enforcement action, when you're developing a SEP, that's obviously important because you're finding out what the community wants for the specific project. But I think we're trying to do, and I think what EGLE needs to step into doing is having more communication outside of an enforcement action. So, you know, I think with this whole conference, there's the theme of you need to get to know your community. And that's definitely something that we are working on, hoping to improve in the future. So, you know, like I said, outside of the actions, what does the community want? You know, you might see a project that could develop into a SEP, but might take a bit if there's not an enforcement action. Other things that we'd like to do is something we've been talking about is extending our public comment periods. So for the air quality division, we are required to put any enforcement action out for a public notice and comment and give the public a minimum of 30 days to give us comments on this. So previously we had opened the public comment period and then we have a public hearing and then it ends and the public comment period ends. But I think what we found is that, you know, people might not find out about this hearing until a week or a few days beforehand, and they just don't have enough time to digest the information. And so when you have the public hearing, we usually have an information session before it, and it gives people a lot more information and an opportunity to ask questions. And then extending that comment period past the public hearing deadline allows people to, I think, digest the information and give a better comment to us. Also, I think another important aspect is being honest and transparent, which I think is a big theme of this conference as well. So on our side, it does take a lot of work to pull off a successful project. You know, George and Janine and I have worked on the marathon SEP, and also with Justin, like we do a lot of work internally with the company and with the community. It's a lot of communication, it's a lot of back and forth. Trying to figure out exactly what we need to do to think of all aspects of the project. And, you know, we need to communicate that with the community. A lot of times we are bound by rules and regulations and policies, and that guides what we can and cannot do. So being transparent with the community about those limitations, I think is helpful on both ends. So, important not to overpromise, you know, tell a community that we can do like a Cadillac Escalade project when we only have enough money for a Ford Focus project. Not that a Ford Focus is a bad car, but we have to, or a bad project, sorry, but we have to, you know, maximize and make it the best project with the money and funds and expertise that we have. And the last point I want to make is that I think we've definitely found out on our side, the government side, that it's important to be okay with saying, I don't know, and letting the community know that you might not know the answer to the question now, but you will definitely circle back around with who you can and get back to them with an answer. For example, this marathon air filtration and cooling system is basically an HVAC project. You know, none of us are HVAC experts, so we had to reach out to different people when the community had questions about, you know, the structure of the building or where the different pieces were going to go. So a lot of the times we had to circle back and keep that communication open with the community.
Thank you, Erin. I think those are really important points. And I'd like to also hear a little bit from Justin, because I think, you know, in working through the Marathon SAP, we all regularly talked with community members, and that is really important to express how much gratitude we have for the time that the community invested in Justin. So I'd like to hear, Justin, your thoughts too, because you were involved for quite some time on developing the Marathon SAP, and why is open communication important?
I think Aaron raised a lot of good points, and I think one of the pieces of developing and pushing through a SEP that's important is all of the kind of legal and policy restrictions make it that much more important to have open communication. I mean, the agreement is technically between the state and the company, but in order for the project to be good, in order for it to be community centered, the company needs to be communicating with the community. And then, you know, the community also needs to be in communication with folks like the Detroit public school system that had information and ideas about how the air filtration system should be installed or what their requirements were. So it was kind of a dance between 4 or 5 different stakeholder groups. The number of community members on the community committee out of 48217, we held town halls, and I remember Teresa Landrum and I went door to door asking people for input. So there was a lot of communication on the community side to get buy-in, and then taking that buy-in to the company, I think, was really important. But from EGLE's perspective, I think open communication is just so important, because you want the SEP to be a reflection of, you know, this new focus on environmental justice, this new focus on building trust in the community. And if a project is good on paper, but that communication isn't there and that trust isn't there, and people don't understand that this is an effort to make good on something that was wrong, then I think you lose out on some of the benefit of what supplemental environmental projects can offer. I also just think from a sustainability perspective, making sure that these projects can be sustainable, whether it's getting additional funding or getting stakeholders involved, it's just really important to communicate. And I think the longer comment periods are certainly a part of that. I'll say that the general sense that I think a lot of activists and organizers and community members have on not just SEPs, but just environmental enforcement and environmental regulation in general, is that oftentimes the decision's already made by the time there is a public hearing, or by the time there's a comment period. A lot of folks may feel like, you know, the decision's already been made. So having open communication from start to finish, and the diagram that was shown earlier about, you know, when there's a violation, starting that communication there before then, and even when there's not a violation, I think it's just so important.
And I'd like to go from there to talking a little bit more about, you know, how communities can help engage with us and also businesses. So, you know, we can't keep going back to the Marathon example, but we did really try very hard to make sure that the community was, you know, we were taking those comments, setting up extra meetings, having phone conversations. And George and Justin, I really saw your role too, as you guys know the community, you know the facility, and you also, George, I think based on your experiences too, you had a relationship with the business as well as with the community. So maybe you can give us some tips, you know, on how businesses, because I'm hoping, you know, this isn't just a discussion for communities, it's also a discussion for businesses as well, as how can they engage with communities in developing a SAP?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. I mean, there's no really magic formula to do this, but I think if companies embrace the themes from this conference that we've heard over the last couple of days, you know, listening, hearing the community stories, being transparent, open communication. I mean, those key things go a long way in building that trust. You know, if you're a facility in an EJ area, you know, my recommendation would be to be an active participant in that community that you're a part of. You know, don't make community outreach a priority. Make it part of your business practice. you know, a lot of the EJ community have lived in the neighborhood for quite a while. You know, listen to their stories, listen to their lived experiences, acknowledge, you know, the things haven't gone as they should have in the past, and commit to being a better neighbor. I think also in terms of communication, I think you also need to meet with the community on a regular basis, whether that's informal or on a formal basis. You know, I've seen companies develop a community advisory panels where they meet with the community and the community members on a periodic basis to update them on, you know, how's the facility operating, some of the community concerns. It's just keeping that dialogue open. And then I guess I would say, you know, as a facility, let the community know who to contact if they have issues with, you know, oh, I saw this happen this day, who do I contact to answer my question on what happened? So those sort of things, whether it's, you know, using technology or going door to door, just really be open, have that open line of communication, I think goes a long way in building trust.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think just because we only have 8 minutes left, we have a lot of questions too. And actually, we had prepared quite a few more for the panel. But I would like to, we've been getting a lot of questions about, you know, a framework for community engagement and, you know, how can communities get more involved? I think you guys have touched on some of the questions that we've gotten, but I do want to say that it's really important that we, you know, try to anticipate early on in an enforcement action that there potentially is going to be a community desire to have a supplemental environmental project. So it's something that we're thinking about right at the beginning, because it does take time to develop a good SEP. We want to invest in that time. So maybe to wrap up, Aaron and John and others could talk a little bit about, you know, how EGLE and EPA are looking to improve the SEP process. So John, why don't you start, please?
Thanks, Janine. So I liked Justin's example of the 4-person or 5-person dance, and I think that's exactly right. I've always thought of it as the game where you have someone behind you and you've got your arms linked and you're kind of standing up at the same time, because like Janine said, it takes a little bit of effort to get a really good project. And in this case, it seems like it's a 3-person effort between the company, the regulator, the community, and everyone's got to be standing up at the same time. And it's a challenge to do that. So what are we doing to make that a little bit easier? You know, it's always easier when you get more notice, like I think Aaron already spoke to, about the fact that we're going to be doing this type of effort. It's hard to do that on short notice because the community might not be ready. Projects might not be ready. And those ballast examples, they seem simple. Every school has lighting, but do you know which lighting is older lighting and which schools have it and where it is and the number of ballasts and how much that would cost? Those are the types of questions that come up. So more lead time is helpful to be able to identify good projects. And the same thing with even something simple like a street sweeper. Is that something that the city needs? Is that something that would be helpful to this project? Those are good questions to ask. And it does take time to run down to make sure that the project is, at the end of the day, going to be meaningful and really address the impact in the community.
I can add to that. I think that one of the things that we are hopeful will help promote SEPs into the future is our new SEP policy that we finalized last year. So we really put a focus on incentivizing community input and outstanding and high quality SEPs in this new policy. So we also want to encourage companies to do more public health SEPs. I think these are ones that we are hearing that communities really want to see, because these kind of provide more tangible benefits to the community versus a project such as, you know, buying and donating land for a park. So that's something we'd like to promote. Also, I think something we need to do in EGLE is, push all of the divisions to do SEPs. I know air quality has done a lot. And I know we have issues with being understaffed and overworked, but I guess I'm speaking to my fellow EGLE members. If there is a, a SEP that maybe you're thinking about, but you don't know what to do or how to do it, like reach out to Janine and I. Like, we've learned a lot throughout these processes, developing these SEPs. Like, we're more than happy to help you. And then again, just doing more listening with open ears and open minds.
We want to build off of the work we've done over the last couple of years, and we had met with some of the community members in 2018 as we were working through what potential changes to the SEP policy we could make. And one of the discussions we had was coming down and doing more face-to-face, like getting communities together and talking through potential projects. So Nick Leonard from Great Lakes Environmental Law Center reached out to me recently to schedule a time to talk about a term of art, I guess you could call it, that's a SEP bank. So basically having projects ready to go. And what's difficult, but also really important, is we do want to try to think ahead. Sometimes we don't know when we're going to have another enforcement action. So we're kind of at the end of the process for AQD, but it's really critical for us to continue to talk, because we all have learned from these experiences. And we want to engage more with communities as well as with like local government. So there's a lot of opportunity here. We kind of built off of, I used to work in Oregon, and so we had a pretty strong SEP program there. And coming to Michigan, we tried to build off that. But without George and Justin and John, a lot of the stuff that we did in the last 2 years wouldn't have been as successful, because it's critical to know the communities. It's critical to get down to the communities, understand what their needs are, and we've heard that throughout this conference. So thank you all for your help and support and your expertise, and we look forward to doing more supplemental environmental projects in Michigan. We are available for folks, if you have questions or want to give us a call anytime. So thank you so much for all your efforts, and we hope to do more.
Thanks a lot for that conversation, all of you. I know we have a lot of questions in the question and answer bin, and we also have some on Whova. So these panelists are I'm going to make them go in Whova and make sure they answer all those questions at least. And we'll try to get back to you on some of these questions. I think, some of them were kind of asked and answered a little bit or referred to. We also had questions on, notification. And I think Justin and George talked about that a little bit. We've talked in some other sessions about how you can sign up to get notifications from EGLE on specific actions like that. We're always working towards changes and improving that process. So I think any ideas that you have are great. I love that Justin and Teresa Landrum were out walking the streets. I mean, I think we would love to have a team of staff that could actually do that in communities. We do work with our partners at Department of Health and Human Services on some projects, not necessarily SEP projects, but to do a little bit of that as well. And it's always a challenge to get everybody's voice heard and to get that information to everybody who might be interested. So appreciate those conversations. Before I let you all go, and obviously you're welcome to leave whenever you want to, but I want to make sure that I just kind of talk quickly about making sure that if you are interested in the next session, we're going to be talking about reviving the land, reimagining brownfields and EJ communities. So that should be a really interesting conversation starting at 11:30. So we have a little bit of a break. I know I'm going to get up, stretch my legs, get a little drink of water, something like that before I attend the next session. But please continue to engage with us on Whova and enjoy the rest of your day. Rate this session if you get a chance, and don't forget to watch those videos of anything that you ended up missing. So again, really, really appreciate everybody's time and effort with all of this. Thanks to the panel for talking about SEPs, something near and dear to my heart that I really want to see more of. So have a great rest of your day and enjoy the rest of the sessions.